So I'm going to try to relate philosophy in the flesh to Ishmael, um, Daniel Quinn's book about the need to figure out a new model of life besides civilization. A lot of the philosophies that Lakoff and Johnson are sort of showing that are untenable based on what we can now tell empirically about the way the brain works involve the basic metaphors for um, the idea of civilization. And, someone said that in the comments to one of the videos about Daniel Quinn's ideas that it sounded more like I was attacking capitalism than civilization. But in a sense, capitalism, which I guess by that what we really mean is what's gone on in the last 200, 250 years or so with the rise of industrialization and technology and the ability of science not to observe the world necessarily, but to build machines out of the world, out of matter, out of earth, that use oil, that consume energy of all kinds, which is actually a natural resource, which isn't really a resource. It's a living organism. It's part of our own body, our own ecosystem. And so, back to relating these two books, I think in the last chapter of Philosophy in the Flesh, they sort of showed what this new science of the mind means for personhood. What does a person become if the mind is embodied? And he talked about a couple things. He talked about spirituality and what an embodied spirituality would be like. But he also talked about evolution and how we conceptualize evolution and how it sort of leaks over into our understanding of economics, morality, and society. And basically the folk theory of evolution, as Lakoff and Johnson put it, is that evolution is competition and that the best competitor is the one who survives. But that's not really what Darwin's theory said. Darwin's theory was a description of how organisms over time will evolve to fit into certain niches. There's nothing really, the addition of the competitor metaphor is an after-the-fact interpretation or metaphorization of the empirical scientific data itself, which Darwin cataloged. So we could also metaphorically conceptualize Darwin's theory with something like evolution proceeds as nurture is received by the organism from the environment. So in other words, cooperation, intimacy, relationship are what drive evolution rather than competition. And both metaphors seem to align to some of the empirical data. But it does indeed seem like the relationship, the nurturance model of evolution is in fact more correct and a more accurate representation of the world if we're going to have such a thing, which from the embodied mind you really can't have a representation of the world. You can have a conceptual metaphor of the world, which means you understand something that you really can't understand in terms of something you can understand. That's what a metaphor is. You take something you know and you compare it to something you don't know, and you understand that thing that you don't know in terms of your experience of what you've compared it to. And we do that with everything. Most of our thought is unconscious. Most of our experience of reality is unconscious, and we only pay attention to small portions of it at a time. We can shift around and pay attention to different portions, but we focus in on individual slices of our experience, and we lose track of the fact that there's also all this other stuff going And so when we conceptualize evolution literally as the competition between individuals um, that it's so often seen as, we really are projecting a lot onto nature that isn't actually there. Um, so we just have to be careful of that. And the whole idea that nature is a nurturing uh, um, relationship that the organism is engaged with led Lakoff and Johnson to talking about what spirituality is from the embodied perspective. And what it ends up being is the sense that there is no disembodied soul or essence of you that can be reincarnated or that can die and go to heaven, that the body would die and the soul would go to heaven. That's just a metaphorical understanding of the mind as an object. And um, we don't have experience of the mind in that way. Our experience of the mind is embodied, and our concepts of the mind are based on our sensory, motor, and perceptual neural capacities. So the thought is embodied. It takes place in a brain, in a body, in a world. And that brain-body-world system is really one organism. It's not just the body which is alive or somehow special, containing all of the causal force or purpose. The whole thing is inherently purposeful and self-creating. And when we know that empirically, from studying the way the brain functions and our conceptual systems function, a sense of spiritual relation and communion to everything that exists just sort of, it becomes a rational necessity based on sound evidence. And I think that is really what's required to walk away from the capitalistic or civilizational model of everything as competition, that man must compete against nature in order to survive because nature is blind and stupid and man is intelligent and rational. That whole idea is what supports civilization. And to be more embodied with our philosophy and our politics and our morality and our ecology and our agriculture and our science, that's really what we need to do in order to move beyond civilization. We need to embody our thought, connect our mind to our heart.